Welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Emily Murase, Executive Director of the Japantown Task Force, and we're delighted that you could take time out of your evening to join us for a very important community briefing on the Peace Plaza cultural elements. We are at a pivotal moment in our planning as we work towards shoveling, breaking ground, shoveling the renovation beginning in 2024. First, I'd like to introduce co-chair John Osaki of the Peace Plaza Committee. The other co-chair is Rich Hashimoto, who is also with us today. John.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to thank you all for joining us here today. We are in the home stretch of what has been a journey, really, to get to this point. I was just looking at an article about this project, and for some of us, this started back in 2015. So it has been exactly that. It's been a journey. We are really grateful to be in the home stretch. I want to thank the design team, everybody who has put in just a tremendous amount of time and effort into this project. And just a couple quick notes I wanted to just mention, if some of you have not heard, at the last community meeting that we had, we talked about that there was still a potential shortfall on this project. And I'm very, very pleased to share that our very own Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi has recently designated through federal funds $3 million, which we believe will close the gap on this project. And so we look to be in great shape. So we're going to plow forward to make sure that this project stays on time and on budget. And we're really looking forward to the outcome. And all of you are a big part of, realizing what this project can and should be for the Japantown community. I just want to say really quickly, so tonight we are going to be focusing on the cultural elements that the design team has worked with many of us to produce. And I'm just very excited to have this opportunity to share these ideas with you. We are going to focus on their proposals for cultural elements tonight. So look forward to the conversation, the comments, and I can guarantee you that every single one of them will be read, will be considered as we finalize and head down the home stretch of this project. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to our conversation tonight.
Thank you so much, John. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Marian Koss, our intrepid project manager for the Peace Plaza renovation project. She is with the Department of Recreation and Parks, and we're very fortunate to have her lead the design team. Marian.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, John. Thank you, everyone in the Japantown Peace Plaza Committee, all the members that we've met with monthly, for you that are attending today, and it's an honor for us to work on this project and really to serve you. So I'd just like to say that although I'm going to be presenting today, I really am presenting for the entire team. And just to touch upon a few of them, Public Works is the landscape architect, Jennifer Cooper, who leads a group of, landscape architects, engineers, structural, mechanical, electrical, all our outside consultants is here today as well. We have waterproofing consultant, McInnes Chen, structural, Biggs Cardosa, historic preservationist, because this is a historic site, is ICF, cost estimator to make sure we're on track the whole way, Emily, lighting designer, HLB, you'll see some of his ideas today, and of course our cultural consultant, RHAA, whom you know as Masahiro Inoue, and Nathan Lozier, who are also here, and Michael DiGregorio, who was the original PM for this project, is working for Hood Design now, but cannot let it go. So he's part of this project as well. And Mas, I know that you're not going to be talking today, but I don't know if you just wanted to say a few words about the project right now.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Masahiro Inoue, and yeah, so I have helped on this project since the beginning. I think it's 2018 or something. and it's been a long journey, and it's coming along. We're as a team, we're everyone collaborating pretty good, and we're excited to share our progress today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mas, because he has been part of every step of the way here. And then you're going to be meeting Jeremy Regenbogen, who is with Macchiato, and he's going to be doing our interpretation. And I'm going to let him introduce himself as we move forward. I don't know if he's around that you can peek in. But what I'll do now is I'll just give you the entire agenda so that you know what you're in for, and then pass it on to Jeremy. I'll start out giving you an update as far as where we are right now with the project, and then we will pass it on to Jeremy. And then from there, he's going to pass it back to me. And during his conversation and his presentation, there's going to be 2 questions. And each one will pause for you guys to respond to those questions. And with that, let's get started. First slide, please. I am seeing Moss now. Okay, great. Thank you. Cool. Okay. Second slide. So this here is just to remind yourself of what we have right now. For those of you, you are very familiar with the project, so I'm just going to zoom through these slides. Next slide. This here is our design. And what we have here is, let me just see if I can get myself a cursor. I'm not quite sure how to do this. Okay, what you're seeing here is our current design. It's very similar to what you saw before. The areas in the front are the 2 sort of planted areas that have these intimate nooks, and then the open space that allows for a lot of flexibility further on into the plaza. Further back, you see the cherry trees that are surrounding the pagoda now, and this is all part of the upper plaza. And the lower plaza, in the distance, you can see there is the step seating, and then in the back, the Gary Street wall. Next slide. This here shows you the different indications of where these are that I just covered. Next. This is a reminder of the 5 goals that were created during the vision planning of this project. And I just want to go briefly through them, which is, of course, to make Post Street visually open and inviting, provide a large permanent stage, and we have extended the area in front of the pagoda, make Peace Plaza an inviting and playful space so that it's multi-generational, create an inviting visual expression along Gary Boulevard edge, and then incorporate the cultural significant elements, which these are what we're focusing on today. Next. A reminder that this is predominantly an infrastructure project, right? It is a plaza that sits on 2 levels of the garage underground, and it's predominantly concerned about waterproofing and about the weight that is in the structure that's below. And so, as John mentioned, we have now solidified $34 million in bond, state and federal. Thank you all for all your advocacy during that time. And then just briefly pointing out future schedule. We are going to Civic Design in March 20th. So mark your calendars. I still don't have an agenda from them. But then construction, we're expecting to start early next year. So somewhere in the early part of the year into spring. And then, of course, opening in the fall of the following year. Next slide, please. What you see here are the previous plan that presented to you in September and the proposed plan, which is very similar. If you notice up at the top where Post Street is, there are some we used to have the cherry trees on Post Street, and then we heard the feedback from you to have the cherry trees near the pagoda because it's a significant part in the connection between both of those cultural elements. So we've switched those around. And in addition, we had a grove of trees that that basically came up from the plaza. Because underneath the plaza, there's very little area for the roots, we decided to actually add a planter on top of the plaza in order to give it more root ball, right? And that way it gives us larger trees. And so what you see here are the green that surrounds the pagoda in like that S curve is to provide a deeper area, deeper root system for the trees. And those are the only two significant changes. Next, please. All the cultural elements. You've seen this slide before. I'm just going to go through them from the left to the right and going down the column. So up at the left-hand column are the boulders, and the boulders are going to be scattered throughout the landscape area, and as well we're putting them on the stairs like we have them similar to the way that it's located now, and also in the stepped seating area. The cherry trees, as we noted, we moved them from the front to closer to the pagoda. So the front, the trees that are going to be up front will be the Japanese maple, and then surrounding the pagoda are the cherry. The pagoda is, I just want to report that we passed CEQA with the pagoda, and we've gotten SF Planning has approved basically the seismic retrofit that we proposed and that we brought to the committee months ago. It's just taken months to be able to go through the process, but we're excited to talk to report on that. The eternal flame, which is in the lower left, is something that Jeremy's going to bring up, so I'm going to leave that for him. Then at the top right-hand corner, the Cultural Heritage Monument is remaining in its same location. Again, also with the boulder that's in front of it and all the plaques that are there as well. And the one right under that is the water feature. And I bring this one up because it's something that has been kept in our design. We cannot have water, similar to not having an open flame with the eternal flame. We can't have water on the site, mainly because of the fact that we want to keep water out of the garage, and it is a waterproofing project. And on top of it, the weight of water is quite heavy on the plaza, so we eliminated that component of it. However, we have a way of expressing the water that we wanted to have in that location, and we'll show you what we have with that. And then, of course, our calligraphy, Jeremy's also going to talk about that, and our flag poles, remain in their same location. Next slide, please. Okay, Jeremy, now it's my chance to introduce Jeremy Regenbogen. Lucky for me, I've worked with him for many years on many projects, and I'm totally always inspired by the design solutions that he comes up with. And so I'm going to pass it on to Jeremy, and I'm really excited that you guys get to hear it from him, all the ideas that we've been working on.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremy Regenbogen. Nice to see a few familiar faces and many of you who I don't know. I thought I'd give just a brief introduction. I see a question in the queue from Karen Kai asking for a little bit of an intro. I've been living in San Francisco for 30 years and doing a lot of interpretive work in the city specifically. I've done the experiences at the Presidio Visitor Center, Land's End Lookout, the Golden Gate Bridge Visitor Center, and a number of other features that are across the city and even outside of the city. Usually every single project that I do is something unique and different and encompassing some component of storytelling and finding ways of appropriately covering the stories that we want to feature within the site. So I became involved in this project about a year and a half ago, and just want to share with you some of the details that we've been developing to date. And a couple of those will be some options that we'll present back to you to hopefully get a little insight and input on preferences for those. So if we can advance to the next slide, please. So we've got a number of features that are in the site currently, and I just wanted to note that we're not moving any of these. There's a really important Japantown history walk that's throughout Japantown, and it culminates in a couple of panels that also happen here in Japantown Peace Plaza, and inclusive of these other three artistic panels, the innovation, transition, and introduction. So just noting that all of those are staying, and what we're doing is complementing and augmenting that with additional storytelling. So in addition to the cultural features that Marion just went through, we'll also be adding some of these interpretive features. And if you can go to the next slide. So notably, one of the things that we hope to add, or that we will add, is an interpretive panel that has a storytelling specific to Japantown Peace Plaza, its history and significance. The content that you see here is just placeholder. There's nothing real in that. We're developing the story, and that story will be a comprehensive kind of telling of the history of the Peace Plaza. Also noting, you'll see in a lot of these drawings, these figures off to the side, they're not a part of the design at all. They're just to indicate scale, so you can get a sense of how large some of these features are within the panel. I mean, sorry, within the site. So this is the interpretive panel that just features the storytelling unique to the site. It augments that those other interpretive features that I mentioned. If we can jump to the next slide. And then we also feel that introducing the site at its entrances is really important. So this already happens at the south wall facing Gary Street. And what you see in the upper right-hand corner of this image is a reproduction of what we plan to show as introductory signage. So we will highlight that it's Japantown Peace Plaza, and then we'll be reiterating the AWA calligraphy that exists inside the site. We'll bring that to the outside. And then the image that you see just below that is what we're proposing happen on the north end of the site, at the Post Street entrance. And that too would be a reproduction of the AWA calligraphy augmented with Japantown Peace Plaza. The two images that you see to the left are just precedent images. They're just to show how that type of treatment is usually done. So something with dimensional letters that's applied, very like a durable, like not vandal proof, but vandal resistant technique. And then also the AWA calligraphy, we'd like to probably carve that into whatever material is available at that location of the site. If we can go to the next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the eternal flame. The existing flame is something that is not unique to the original site. It's actually a reinterpretation of something that was there in the early days when the reflecting pools sat in front of the pagoda. And what we know now is that we actually can't utilize the same supply of gas. It's a safety hazard. And also it's, the existing, if we can jump to the next slide, please. The existing flame that you see to the right, it's relegated to a pretty small feature. So what we want to do is actually elevate this to something a little bit more dominant in the site, not unlike how the original eternal flame that you see to the left was featured. So again, we can't do actual flames, so we're going to do our best to evoke some of these same qualities. And in that, we've got three options that I wanted to show you. If you can jump to the next slide. So the first is to utilize a similar technique to what we were looking at with the original interpretive panel that I showed. So something that's integrated into the wall, it sits flush with the wall and has a pocket that protects it. And then what you see floating around the background of the panel itself is an LED lighting feature that would emulate something like fire. And that's something that we would need to design and come up with like an appropriate effect. It's not going to be like a Disney-like effect where this thing actually looks like it's on fire, but it'll have a soft glow that just evokes the serenity and peacefulness that something like an eternal flame should have. In this particular case, this example is utilizing a polished black granite. So think of like the image that you see to your left, where it's got imagery or text that's carved into it, and that text is actually legible because we color it different from the black granite. So what you see in the panel to the right, this is just sample content. What we're showing right now has some interpretive text talking about the fact that this is an eternal flame and that it's a representation of the original. And then we're also adding a poem. And in this case, again, it's not the real poem that we've picked right now, but we intend to have some sort of Shinto poem that's a reference to the Sumiyoshi Grand Shrine from which the original Eternal Flame came from. And then we would likely have this in both Japanese and English, and likely a calligraphic version as well, like you see. So that's one option. And then a second option, if you can go to the next slide, is something with a little bit more of a literal slant to it. And so the form is exactly the same, that we have this square format that's emulating the original Eternal Flame that sat in front of the pagoda. And we have the same LED lighting that has a quality that's emulating fire. But in this case, we're using perforations in the panel itself. So this would likely be a painted metal panel, and then the perforations could have a symbolic flame reference. So what you see, the flame itself in this panel, is actually the lighting that happens behind it. So it could have a much more literal interpretation of fire. And this too would be adorned with some sort of interpretive text illustrating what the purpose of this display is about. And then the third option, if they go to the next slide, is a little bit of a different take on the visual that we're trying to accommodate here. The examples that you see to the left are what we call, sorry, I'm spacing on the name, a lenticular graphic. So a lenticular graphic is something that when you look at it straight on, as you see in the upper left-hand corner, it has a little bit more of an abstract quality. But if you go and look at an angle, then you only see the elements that are visible from that particular angle. So they're prism-like features that only show the side that you're particularly looking on. And so in this case, we can use that same format to juxtapose both Japanese and English versions of the Shinto poem that I referenced from the first slide. So here we've got 9 different vertical elements, and those are to tie to the 9 elements of the spire of the pagoda. And we likely do some sort of patinaed metal, not unlike the patina that's atop the spire. So again, the same lighting effect. And in this case, the text itself is cut out of the metal, so that what you're seeing through the metal is the fire effect, kind of illuminating the poetry. So we've got these 3 options, and if you can go to the next slide, we've got option 1, which is a flat plane of reflective polished granite etched with a Shinto poem. Option 2 is a flat plane, but it's perforated with the fire effect of the LED lighting behind it coming through as the fire. And then option 3 are the series of the 9 vertical metal elements that are cut with the poem to reveal the lighting behind. All 3 incorporate the lighting. All 3 fit within a protective pocket in a wall. So we turn this to you. We've got a poll, I believe, and perhaps Max, you can jump in and highlight how you all might be able to participate in voting for which you prefer and why.
Okay. If you could please launch the poll, I'll explain what's going on with that. Melissa, could you please launch the poll?
It's already launched and people are participating.
Oh, okay, cool. So what you should see right now is a pop-up window on your screen that says which flame element option do you prefer and why. And then there should be 3 options, option 1, 2, and 3. Please select 1. And then your why, you can type that into chat and then we can all see it. So I'm going to start the timer now. We're going to have 3 minutes for this response. And yeah, well, after the poll is over, we can show what the results are.
While we're waiting for the last folks to enter their vote, I do want to acknowledge Beverly Ng Deputy Director of Policy and Public Affairs from the Recreation and Parks Department. Thank you so much for joining us, Beverly. She was instrumental in helping us secure the extra funding that we needed from federal and state sources. Just a few more votes. We're at 80% participation. So if you haven't voted, please do so now. Okay, I think we want to keep this going. So we've gotten most people's votes in. Would you like to share the results, Max?
I'm sharing them now.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Melissa. So we see that option 1 received the most votes, 14 votes, 64%. Option 2, 23%, and option 3, 14%. This is very helpful in sort of getting a sense of what people would like to see in terms of this very important cultural element. All right, back to Jeremy.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for participating in that. And with that, let's move forward into the next slide and talk about another feature that we would love your input on. So what I'll talk about is the paving, and Marion will follow up with light, but both of these are water expressions that we're looking to accommodate on the site. And I believe you're all aware that we won't actually be able to do a true water feature the way that we had originally planned. There's a number of engineering considerations that would make it impossible. But with that, what we're trying to do is find unique ways of reinterpreting the use of water on the site. And one of those is the paving. So I'll talk about that briefly. Max, you want to advance the slide, please? So water and fog, there's a connection between these two. And with the unique location that we're in San Francisco, we know that fog is a dominant source of water for our community, for our environment. It's a visual symbol for us, and it's our intent to tie this back into the site through the paving. So if we can jump to the next slide, please. And with that, we were looking at Kasumi imagery in order to evoke this quality of the fog, the kind of ephemeral, ethereal nature of it. And that's been often utilized in Japanese art, as you can see in the image to the left, the kind of fog that fits in the foreground. Those are Kasumi patterns. And those have been interpreted in a lot of different ways in Japanese fabrics, as you can see to the right. And what we're looking to do is to do a reinterpretation of Kasumi within the paving. And the paving itself, if we can jump to the next slide, could indeed incorporate this within the square grid pattern that we're utilizing with the specific types of pavers. So we'll probably do a combination of different colored pavers that are similarly colored, but have enough variation in them that you would be able to recognize patterns within them. So in this particular version, option 1, we've got varying Kasumi patterns that fill the entire site somewhat consistently in nature. This is an early study, so this is in no means intended to be the actual pattern itself. We would need to study a lot of the nature of how it affects or how it interacts with the various site features and the scale and size of each Kasumi pattern and whatnot. But the premise here is to use Kasumi pattern and then to have it somewhat consistently applied across the site. Now, option 2, if you can advance to the next slide, is to actually think about the site features themselves as these elements that might trap the fog. And so if you think about how fog moves through hillsides and gets trapped by vertical features, we could indeed take that same approach with the patterns within the paving. And what this does is it just breaks up the consistency of the pattern a little bit, makes it a little bit more varied the way that fog might be in reality. And is just a little bit more playful and celebrates the movement of both fog and the pedestrians that would encounter it. We can go to the next slide. And, you know, I mentioned this nature of the way that fog gets caught up in hillsides and found this really beautiful image of some fog in the hillsides of Japan. And just really enjoyed the kind of ephemeral, ethereal nature of fog that I had mentioned, and wondered if it's possible to reinterpret that image, as you see to the right, into a paving pattern. So I've taken that image, I've made a binary version of it of black and white that you see here, but these are just translations of tiles. So if you can advance to the next slide. And then applied that to the site itself in terms of a tile pattern. So in this case, it's a little bit more of an artistic play on the nature of fog. It's an abstraction of it through the image that I provided. And then it then overlays as a pattern that has a little bit more variability for the site. So it's something that would create this different type of movement through the site, and kind of have a different type of celebration of the north to south movement as well. And so with that, if we can advance to the next slide. And I'll just highlight again that we've got these three options. So the first two are both based on the Kasumi pattern. One is more consistently applied. The option 2 is a little bit more varied in its application so that it adapts to the site features. And then option 3 utilizes that image of fog rolling through the hillside in Japan as an artistic inspiration for the pavement. And so with that, let's turn it back to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what your preferences are with these. And let me just, sorry, before you vote, I just see some questions in the queue. I'll just address that right now. What color will the tiles be? So that's something that we're studying along with the other site materials, but likely somewhere in the dark tan, gray, black range, and not with a super high contrast ratio. We've bumped up the contrast in these images just so they're apparent within the drawings, but it'd be a somewhat subtle effect and very appropriate in coloration for the rest of the site. And so now you should all see a new paving pattern pole, and yeah, thanks for your input.
The question is, which paving design option do you prefer and why? So please enter your vote. And then if you could put your comments into the chat, we're capturing the why piece. So please go ahead and cast your vote. Option 1, option 2,
Let me,
option 3.
this is Masahiro. Let me explain here a little bit more. Yeah, so Jeremy and I, we've been working close actually together, and this Kasumi patterning idea was, I was doing the research, when I was doing the research a while ago, you know, that looking at the historic Japanese art, and then the Kasumi pattern is you see very often, and I was curious about that patterning, and then I actually didn't know that's called Kasumi, and then I'm also originally from Japan, and the word Kasumi is normally, you know, fog is, people say kiri, but then Kasumi is like very poetic and used in the literature, and really sophisticated word, and that's how I kind of get into further research, and then also found out that I used very often in the fabric design, textile design as well. So that was the one concept came out through that research, and I thought that that was like very strong, convincing an idea, you know, specifically related to, you know, San Francisco and also Japanese culture together. So that was the idea, and then translated it into the design. That's just a little background.
Thank you for that explanation, Mas. We really appreciate your creative thinking around this. I think we're going to go ahead and end the poll. Last call on casting votes for option 1, 2, or 3. All right, let's go ahead and share the results. So let's see, option 1 got 3 votes, 17%. The most popular was option 2, 9 votes, 50%, and option 3 received 6 votes, about a third of the vote totals. So please do share with us in the chat some of the reasons for your choice, and we'll go back to Jeremy.
Great. Thank you. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and we will certainly take all of your feedback and use that ongoing to further affect the designs that we're coming up with for this. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marian to talk about lighting.
Thank you, Jeremy. Very much appreciate it. And Moss, and also Emily and Max, he's the guy back behind everything. So just to give you a little background on lighting, we've had a great lighting designer on this project, and we've been tweaking back and forth. So I will be presenting to you a plan showing all of the lighting and how it's going to be shown throughout the site, and then an overview. But what I do want to say is that since we can't have that water feature that we wanted in the lower plaza, our conversations, and we've shown in the past that maybe we can have some light patterns or something like that, we found a technique that could give us some mutable colors on the actual paving. And we're still researching a little further, but I think you'll be pleased with what you see. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so what you're looking at right now is a nighttime scene looking down on the plaza. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through. So if you were to walk from the east plaza to the west, there's a series of lights down the center area, right? And then the two that are right in the middle actually line up with the ones that come in from Post Street, right? So you can see that there's this even distribution of lighting throughout the entire plaza. But then we have these intimate spaces, and it's not necessarily, I want to say, it doesn't give you an intimate feeling if you have overhead light, right? So throughout the perimeter and where the pathways are, there's going to be low lights, pathway lights that are embedded, or into the planter walls. So you'll see them on the west mall edge, inside the intimate areas, and as the cursor shows, on the east side as well. Likewise, you'll see the bamboo that's on the east side. You'll have low lighting in that area so that the pathways feel like you're very well lit. It's all accessible. However, the feeling is going to be one of a mix of overhead and pathways. Where you see in the center, you see all that sort of mutable looking colors. It's going to be lights projected onto the paving. And there's a way that can cause some movement. If you look at the very top right-hand rendering, that was taken from the vision plan in May 2019. So that's the exact image that we were looking for. Since we can't have water, this is the one right below it is a representation of how it's going to feel when we project that onto the lower plaza. And then below, you can actually see this in real life in another project. So, and then on the left, yes, on the left, you see the pagoda lit from within, which is the way that it's similar to the way it is now. We're going to be able to light it in the same way, but have better lighting than is existing right now. So it'll glow in a distance. And let's go to the next slide.
And then it disconnected, and we think it's disconnecting.
I think I heard somebody there. Okay, and so then this is a night scene. We kind of darkened it so you can actually feel the mood, but this is what we're looking at in terms of how the plaza is going to feel. As you can see, we have the overhead light that kind of provide the spot areas, and then the pathways all have light below. And a little hard to see here, but there's going to be these lights all over the steps as you step down into the into the lower plaza. And then in the back wall, this is where we were talking about having the representation of the eternal flame and the interpretive panel. So that glow from beyond will illuminate that back area. And of course, our flagpoles in the distance are also going to be illuminated as well. And next slide. And this is it in the daytime, one that you have seen. And this is our last slide. I want to leave you with an image that is just inspiring to me. And with that, it concludes my presentation, and I get to pass it back to Emily.
Thank you so much, Marian. We have an expert panel, including Marian, Jeremy, Jennifer Cooper, the manager of the Landscape Architecture Bureau of the Department of Public Works, here, who are all ready to answer your questions. So there were a couple of questions out of the comments from the polling. So let's see, I know, Jeremy, you responded to some questions, but I want to make sure we cover them. Let's see. The first question, in terms of the paving elements, Alice wanted to see them all side to side. Can we go back to that? Can we go back to that slide?
Yes, 1 second. I think it's this one.
Yes. So Jeremy, do you just want to remind folks what the three options are for some folks who may have come later into the meeting?
Right. Yeah. So we've got the three options. The first two options, 1 and 2, are inspired by Kasumi patterns, and the Kasumi patterns are traditional Japanese variations of mist within artwork, and we've taken that as an inspiration for how we might interpret fog on the site. And again, there's more studies that need to be done in this realm to make sure that we've got the patterns correct and their scale correct and the way that they're legible with their contrast within the tiles. And then the third option was something that was inspired by an image of fog rolling through a hillside. So it's a little bit of a different take on the way that fog and mist work with the site.
Thanks, Jeremy. The next question is, will the lighting water feature only be visible at night? Glynis, president of JTF, shared that she was at Japan House in Los Angeles, and there were a number of similar lighting effects at the entrance, and it was visible also during the day.
So right now, thank you for that question, Glynis. Right now, we know that it will be visible at night, and I've been able to see some videos of it at night, but we're still kind of investigating the technology of it. So I have to get back to you to see how strong the effect will be during the day as well.
Thank you, Glynis. Next is Linda Mihara of Paper Tree. Will the light representing the water element move like water, or is it static?
So we're still working through the technology of it. Oh, do you want to do that, Jennifer? Because it's pretty cool.
Sure. I've been looking into it because it uses something called gobos, which is what creates the pattern. And so what we were looking at is that the light stays steady and that the gobo itself can actually move to create a feeling of movement. So we're looking into all the options on that, but it looks like we can move the gobo and keep the light static to just create that feeling of movement.
Thank you for the question, Linda. Another JTF board member, Lucy Fisher, asks, will the lights in the pagoda be able to change color?
Yes, the lights in the pagoda will be able to change color, and we're really excited about that. Rec and Park has a technology that they use at a lot of our sites. So if you know what's going on over at Coit Tower, for instance, and how that tower changes colors, it's a similar system that we'll be using.
All right. Glynis asks if it's possible to depict the lighting effect in the pagoda. In the original brochure, It says, quote, "The pagoda will be beautifully reflected in a clear water of the pool as night draws on. The whole structure will be illuminated in a soft light. It will look as if the pagoda is carved in relief against the nocturnal sky and floating on water in a fairy land."
That sounds beautiful. I'm afraid that we wouldn't be able to show that kind of a reflection. If we did, it's one of those situations where if it were a reflecting pool, wherever you move, you'd have that reflection. However, if we did a pattern on the actual surface, we would end up with that view from only one direction. So it's a little kind of disorienting and deceiving. We think that the best solution would be to have that mutable sort of feeling in one location. So sorry, I try really hard.
We have a comment from Alice. Kawahatsu Sensei thinks the sakura trees in the planters sticking out is not necessary. He prefers a more open look. So thank you for that comment. We will continue to collect written feedback on the latest designs. There is a Google form that we will post that is posted with the materials on the JTF website. And so Melissa put the link into the chat if you'd like to also provide additional written comment. Let's see, Karen asks if the team will be working with Linda Mihara to create a placeholder for the proposed Peace Cranes sculpture.
Yes, I'll say yes to that, because we are able to accommodate as projects, get approved and there's more information on it. We're able to do that as well. So the answer to that is yes.
All right. I don't see any other questions. If there are questions from the audience, please put them into the chat. I do want to, Tomo Hirai of Nichibei News asks, will the images of the proposed renderings be available? And the answer is yes. We will be posting the images that you saw today in the Japan Center Mall. Right now, there are some designs and drawings in the space that was formerly Auto Freaks in the West Mall as you enter to the left, and you'll be able to see the renderings that we discussed tonight in the Japan Center Mall.
Emily, let me add a few more things. So two things. Like one is about the cherry trees, and then the other thing is for the paving material. And so that for cherry trees, also the Japanese maple trees, both like we've been really trying to have larger trees installed. Also, in the current plaza, there are, as everyone knows, there are smaller, planters with the, little trees sticking out, and it's not growing large because of the, planter itself is very small. So the tree requires a lot of, requires a lot of soil area to grow, of course. So we are doing a lot of study to basically consider the area for the healthy tree growth. And also, current plaza has, a lot of cherry trees, but then structurally, actually, the parking garage cannot support those trees. And then also, the California building code has been changed, and we cannot afford to have a lot of trees. So there are a lot of structural limitations, and they ending up, so this is the maximum amount of trees that we can have, but we're trying to make sure that the old trees will grow healthy So that's ended up also we needed to change that design change we needed to make. And so that's the background. So we are really trying to make sure that we're going to have a nice trees. So that's one. And for the paving material, we haven't mentioned, but so that's not going to be a real stone. So because of also the weight constraints, so we cannot have a real stone pavers. So instead, we found out that it's called a material called porcelain pavers, and they are very thin and lightweight, but it's really durable. And also its technology is advanced so much, and it looks like a real stone. So we're looking into that material, and then the paver size will be 2 feet by 2 feet. So that's the one paver, and then set in the mortar set and make sure it's not gonna move. They're not gonna move, and yeah, it's gonna look very nice, looking like a real stone. So it does, within the one paver, it will have a nice, texture. It's not gonna be like a, concrete paving like one tone. It's gonna be really nice. Material wise, it's gonna be very nice.
All right, we have a couple more questions. We're almost at time. So if you do have a question, now is your chance. Let's see. Will the strengthening and repair of the pagoda happen in tandem with the plaza improvements? Can you talk a little more about the scope of the renovation?
Yes, I'm happy to. It will be in tandem. At one time, we were thinking of having it separate, but it makes more sense to just have it all together and be part of one bid package. So we're excited that they're in line with each other. And so what's been approved is the concentric beams that you see all the way up. There's 5 levels. Those beams are going to need to be beefed up. That's just an easy way of saying that they're going to be thicker, but the way that they're going to be thickened is not necessarily going to be perceived from below, because we want to make sure that we have that character defining feature. And then there's going to be some more attachments on the roof at each level. And then there's going to be some tension rods, like steel rods that are very small. They're probably about 3/4 of an inch thick, that are going to run along the side of each column, each of the 9 columns, 2 on either side. And they're just going to be attached to the outside. And this is going to help with any of the lateral movements that could potentially happen. And then lastly, there's going to be these strips that are going to go pretty much the full length as well of those pillars, and they're going to be embedded into the podium level. So that's pretty much the gist of it. Some wrapping that's happening to the lower levels of the columns, but it's all very, very tastefully done, because we want to make sure that we preserve and celebrate the proportions and all of those character defining features. So I hope that wasn't too technical.
Thanks, Marianne. We have 3 more questions in the queue. Grace Horikiri, our partner at the Japantown Community Benefit District, asks, construction to hopefully start in the spring of 2024 and end the following fall in 2025. What is the timeline for this?
So right now we're planning to issue what we call notice to proceed with the construction at the beginning of next year, right? And that usually means that a few months are needed to get all the paperwork ready, right? Get all the materials ordered, get them to mobilize. So actual on-site construction doesn't start at the moment that we start the contract with the contractor. And our anticipation is that actual construction as you see it, will start sometime beginning to spring of next year. As we get closer, we can get a more defined date. And then it'll go through the full 2024 and into half and into the fall of 2025. And that's what we're anticipating. I can't give you months right now. I know that's what you want, but I can't give you months right now.
Thank you, Marian. Yes, as the schedule gets refined, it will certainly be reported out to the Peace Plaza Committee. This is an invitation for folks to continue to follow developments through the JTF Peace Plaza Committee, which meets monthly. All the details and the agenda are posted to our website. Let's see, just a few more questions. Karen Kai asks, will the pavers on the upper plaza be thick and durable enough to withstand the delivery traffic that will have to go through the area, since the west side access ramp will be eliminated? And sort of together with that question, Linda Mihata asks, have you considered anything to deter skateboarders? That has to do with the paving.
Yes, and so the material that we've selected is very different than the material that is visible right now on the site. And like Moss mentioned, porcelain tiles, they are extremely durable. And so we're really excited about that. We found something that has a great sort of mottled look and texture, and that is really durable and strong. So the answer to that. And then in terms of skateboard deterrence, well, our design team has strategically placed things to deter skateboarders. But in addition to that, they've built in the seating deterrence to skateboarders. And so we will have skate deterrence throughout the site. And as much as we can, help it, we're going to deter skateboarders from our site.
Thanks,
and to add to that, there's another question about boulders. And so we are reusing the actual stones from the existing site. And so some of those are part of the kind of amphitheater deck seating. And so those are also strategically placed to make it not as accessible to skateboarders. And also for the elderly, we're adding arms and backs to some of the benches. And so those are acting in that capacity, of course, but then the fact that there are arms on some of the benches will also deter skateboarders, just as a matter of course.
Thank you for that question. Rob Conover asked whether the boulders are going to be real or not, and we are reusing the boulders that exist today. Okay, Glynis asks, will the pagoda design meet Secretary of the Interior Standards preservation expert? Has a preservation expert been consulted?
Yes, yes, and yes. We've hired a preservation consultant that was with this project for the last year and a half, maybe even longer. In addition, they hired a structural engineer to make sure, who's also a preservationist, and that was on our side of it. But when we went to the planning department, they had their own preservationists, and they followed the Secretary of Interior standards. I actually I'm pretty well versed in that, so it was really great communicating with them on that level. So all of the character defining features are, being retained, celebrated, and yeah, we're really excited about it. We came up with a really good solution. We need to have some sort of stability to it, a seismic upgrade, but the solution has been really, really successful.
Thank you, Marian. Let's see, we have an anonymous Zoom user who asks, is there any chance that Recreation and Parks could explore linking San Francisco's two historic pagodas, one in the Japanese Tea Garden at Golden Gate Park and the other at the Japantown Peace Plaza?
Maybe I'll take this just because that is indeed an interpretive opportunity, and we often like to look at context. So yeah, indeed, we'll study that. I think that's an interesting story to potentially incorporate into the interpretive panel.
So I see that we have gone through all of the questions. I want to really thank the design team for their presentation tonight. Again, every month we'll have updates at the Peace Plaza committee meeting. And next week, there will be the designs up in the Japan Center Mall. And I want to put in the Google form, the written Google form, if people have additional comments or questions, please use that tool. And I want to really thank the not only design team, but the leadership of the Peace Plaza Committee, John Osaki, Richard Hashimoto, and the many JTF board members who joined tonight and asked lots of good questions. In particular, I wanted to recognize JTF board member Ben Nakajo, who offered cultural context for these cultural elements and was very helpful in planning for tonight's meeting. Special thanks to AV wizard Max Nihei for all his work behind the curtain. And then I want to recognize JTF staff, Susie Kagami, Akiko Clank, Melissa Bailey, Nihei, Lauren Nosaka for their support tonight. Susie spent many, many hours preparing for tonight. So next time you see them, please thank them in person if you can. But we really appreciate everybody's participation tonight. It's an ongoing process. Again, please join us at our monthly meeting. See you next time.